Welcome to the Recovery Lab podcast. We're glad you were able to join us. Recovery Lab hopes to destigmatize addiction and normalize recovery.
Our platform provides an avenue to share the many stories of those that have recovered from addiction, providing for the listener the most basic antidote to addiction.
Hope. All right, everybody, we're back. This is episode number 75 of the Recovery Lab podcast series. I'm Drew Hassin.
I'm Daniel Anderson.
We are the Recovery Lab. We're joined today, number 75, by Chris Thompson. So, Daniel, why don't you take away the introduction?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Drew. Again, my name is Daniel Anderson. Today, we are joined by the founder and CEO of the Sober Sidekick App. That is what you probably will know him by, but our goal today is to learn everything about Chris. The little that I know about Chris, he is a leader in the recovery world. He has done the work necessary. He's gone through the hells that we create for ourselves. He's done the work to get through that. And now he has a passion for helping other people. And most importantly, helping other people feel connected. And as we know, the opposite of addiction is connection. And what Chris has been able to do through lots of hard work, and I'm sure sleepless nights, is create an app where people like me, who struggle from time to time with connection and feeling alone and feeling sad, and this app, it's immersive. It reaches out to me on a regular basis, may I add. It reaches out to me and encourages me throughout the day with notifications and things that, honestly, I had no idea this app even did. But I'll be going throughout the day and, something, adverse is going on in my life or something's going on and, I may be struggling. And then here's Chris's app. This notification comes up from Chris on the Sober Sidekick app, and it's encouraging and it's real and it's authentic and it's not... It's not offensive in any way, shape, or form. It's just positive reinforcement. So I am incredibly excited to have you on the show today, Chris. And I hope that someone out there gets to learn about who they are and what they can find in this app, and also who you are, because I feel like you are a leader in this world and you are a leader in the sober community. And I just want to dive deep into that. So without further ado, Chris Thompson, founder and CEO of Sober Sidekick App. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about your backstory. So this is not really a speaker meeting per se, but I do want to know what makes Chris tick. What happened with you in your life that led you to where you're at now?
Yeah. Well, first off, grateful to be here. And thank you for the work that you both do in terms of, helping create a world where people realize that they're not alone in whatever they're struggling with. So the question of why me build a sober app is I think the question that I'm hearing. So my sobriety date is Thanksgiving Day 2018. Awesome. I woke up on the sidewalk for the third or fourth day in a row. I was wearing hospital pants. I guess I had been in the hospital. I don't remember. And
it's like that
it
sometimes.
was
My man.
Yeah.
Speaking my language.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah. It's a pre-qualifier.
Right.
I know I
Can you dive into just a little bit, like what the days leading up to that were like? What was when did you start this journey? Did you kind of hit your head against the wall like I did for years and years and years before you got it? Or were you beat down and broken down pretty quickly, and it clicked, and you moved on. What was that like for you? Those days and weeks and months prior to those experiences you just described.
Yeah. 2018. The last good thing that happened for me that year was the Eagles winning the Super Bowl in February.
Right.
And then the year kind of went downhill from there. So for one, I had a relationship end. It was my fault. And after that relationship ended, my motivation to hide my drinking was no longer there. And, I knew I had known I was an alcoholic for a few years at that point in time, but I didn't know if there was anything I could actually do about it without feeling even more isolated and lost than I already was. So alcohol was, not my solution, not my problem, but my only solution.
Right.
It was, the only way I knew how to feel comfortable in my skin, which is a line that you hear from a lot of people
Absolutely.
in recovery. And, so I tried, in the spring when it started to get really bad, I went to, my first AA meeting, and, I kind of saw the steps as like these words on a wall. But I was pretty skeptical, and I was honestly, afraid of being like admitting that like this is who I need to be the rest of my life. I really, really wanted to believe that this was a phase, because at that one time I'm 24. So like,
the idea of not drinking or using for the rest of your life, that is a massive pill to swallow. It was for me, at least. The drugs and alcohol were my best friend. They were literally always there for me when I was low. They were always there for me on those few times when life was good and I wanted to celebrate. Well, hey, they were there with me. So the thought and idea of not having that for any amount of time was devastatingly scary. And that's why the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is so keen on saying, hey, this is a 24-hour program. So continue on.
Yeah. Sorry.
You're good.
Dead on there. I get a couple weeks, then binge, and it was like that for a few months. And that was outside of Philly, where I'm from. That summer I also tried to kill myself. It was getting to the point where every time I went on a binge, by the end of it, I wanted to kill myself. And that summer I actually tried and ended up in a hospital for 4 days, and then a psych ward for like 5 days after that. And all the psych ward taught me is like, if you ever do this, if you ever feel like this is the right choice again, make sure you do it right. That's basically what the psych ward taught me. Because it's not a place that really makes you feel better about life.
Right.
Not being trusted with shoelaces. And then August of that year, I'd gone on another binge really bad, hadn't showed up to work for a week. I was drunk enough to have the courage to call a hotline. And then that hotline told me, we can have you on a flight to a treatment center in LA at 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Wow.
So I kept myself buzzed enough to get onto a plane, and went to a rehab, and really went to that rehab with the perspective that these are the professionals. Maybe they can fix me.
Were you done fighting at that time, or was there still that little tiny voice in the back of your head that said, hey, I'm just going to get this, just a phase. This is just a thing. I'm just going to go to this rehab. I'm going to learn what I need to learn. And then maybe one day in the future, when I'm better, I'll be able to drink and use like a normal gentleman. Was there that thought, or had you reached the end and you were completely convinced that drugs and alcohol are never going to be a solution for you in your life?
Well, yeah, what I think is interesting is I think I knew that drugs and alcohol were never going to work for me. I think I knew that years before, but what I didn't know was how to get rid of that obsession.
Right.
And it's, if I can't get rid of the obsession, and like, how can if I'm thinking about it 24/7 for 7 days in a row, then how am I going to get through this the rest of my life? That's why I was so suicidal at that point in time, because I knew alcohol and drugs weren't working for me. It was so painful, DTs, withdrawing, all the things that go with it. Like life was not fun at all.
Right.
So, I went to that treatment center with the perspective of, maybe they can fix me. Maybe if I get 30 days in a treatment center, the obsession will be gone. I just want, it was either I was going to die or somehow maybe a third party could fix me. I don't know.
Sure.
That's kind of the perspective I went there with. And, so I went to rehab, was there for like 30, 45 days. First day out of rehab in a sober living, this girl on Tinder asked me if I want to do coke, and I'm like, and as soon as you said that, the obsession came right back.
Yes,
As
ma'am.
a matter of fact, I do want to do some coke with you, random Tinder girl.
Yeah. Nothing sounded better at that.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And that started a new string of relapses from September through November 22nd, where each one was worse. It was more scary. I had robbed a dealer and gotten myself with a machete to my throat. Got my phone and wallet stolen, and I'm in LA and I don't know anything about LA, but I'm kind of I'm at this point, because, it was so demoralizing to fly to LA, go to a rehab, all of this was my choice, go to a rehab for 45 days. And then I can't even make it 24 hours out of rehab.
Right.
Okay. I guess this is my fate, and it was kind of that hopelessness, that we've all felt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something, the hopelessness, if you're anything like me, if you're a drug addict and alcoholic like I am, the hopelessness is super thick, especially there at the end. For me, I can only speak for myself, but I, like they talk in the big book, I tried every imaginable remedy to drink and use like a gentleman. And each and every time, like you just discussed, each and every time it got worse and progressively deeper and darker. And you inevitably get to a point, again, if you're anything like me, where it's almost as though, man, I've tried everything. Nothing is ever going to work. This whole, I know a little bit, some people planted some seeds in my mind about recovery and sobriety, but I'll be perfectly honest with everyone in my life. I just don't think that's ever going to work for me. I've tried it. I didn't get any relief. Life was awful. And for some people that maybe they stuck around for 6 months or 8 months, but they were just dry and they were miserable. Of course, I'm not going to stay sober if I'm not having a good time. And if I'm not experiencing some joy and some peace. And, for those people that are, and for me, I was this way, that first year that I was introduced to sobriety and recovery, it was miserable. because I hadn't done the work necessary in order to become at peace with the reasons that I was drinking and using for the first place. Drugs and alcohol were a solution for me. They worked. They were the solution for me until they stopped working. And now I'm left with this monkey on my back, this addiction to drugs and alcohol that I just can't shake. I've tried every imaginable angle to be able to do it, successfully. I've the whiskey and milk, or the whatever that looks like for you in your recovery. We try that. We try everything in our power to make sure that we can do what we have to do in order to feel okay. And what we have to do is we have to do that work. We have to do the hard work. Yes, we have to remove the drugs and alcohol from our system to be able to kind of dry out a little bit, and then start to do the work necessary to become at peace with every part of us and the reasoning why drugs and alcohol were a solution for us. We have to get to the bottom of those issues. If we can't do that, we're going to be miserable and just absolutely miserable in recovery. And nobody wants to be miserable. So if you're miserable and you're sober, no, I'm going to go back out and try to use those medications and those fixes that used to work for me before. And it's just this endless cycle. And that's what it was like for me. It was miserable. And you like you said it, you're completely hopeless at that point. There's nothing in the world that could have given me hope at that time. I finally had to get to a point where I was at my absolute bottom. I had a gun in one hand and I had no other options. It was either do what my sponsor that I had become in contact with recommended of me and the people in the rooms recommended, or just end it all. Those were my two options. And fortunately, I was willing enough and too chicken to actually kill myself to give sobriety another shot. And then I jumped into the work that's necessary in order to become at peace with who I am and to forgive myself for all of the harms that I've done to myself and to others. And that's really where the relief came in, is beginning to forgive myself a little bit. So I want to jump into, so we know a little bit about your story. We know kind of what the darkness was like for you. After the Tinder relapse, and how long did you stay out until you got to the point where you were at your bottom and ready to do something different? What was that timeline like for you?
Yeah. The Tinder relapse, it was basically a weekend, and then I got another 30 days sober, got another 30-day chip, and then went on another binge, and maybe another week sober, and then another binge, and then the last binge, it was probably like 10 days straight, something like that. I AMA'd from a detox, and AMA'd from a detox with my red suitcase and my phone, and had earned a little bit of money right before I went into that detox. So like $1,000 that was only to be spent on hotel rooms and the other stuff.
I like the way you think.
Yeah,
it sounds familiar.
But also, like, I don't know if you guys relate to this or not, but you become a less and less capable addict as time goes on. So I didn't even make it to the hotel that I paid for.
Wow.
Like, so what happened was I got a hotel. I went to it, and then, I'm in a spot where I don't know a lot of people. So I wanted to go see where I could find some some things to complement my drinking.
Sure. Were you in LA
so
at this time still?
Yeah. So I remember I get myself robbed, and then I get pissed off about that. So then I just buy a bottle, and then I wake up in a blackout and I can't find my hotel. And I'm like so far gone where I think I go to the wrong hotel, and I like sleep under a hotel because I can't even find the actual hotel that I paid for. And then I remember waking up from that with not knowing where my phone or my wallet is. And so then I'm just down to my suitcase. And then I get to a point where I just like, I can't even function without alcohol. So I'm just walking in the stores, grabbing a bottle and walking out, and just trying to keep myself from, facing the DTs. And because when I withdraw, it goes straight to DTs. It goes straight to hallucinating. I shake. Like when I'm sober, I can't walk straight. I can't even stand up when I'm sober. That's how bad I binge myself too, and then I remember I woke up in a hospital. I walked out of the hospital. And then it was like 2 or 3 more days of just walking in and out of supermarkets, grabbing a bottle and leaving, for those final 3 days or so.
Right. So walk us through the end. Walk us through that last drink.
Yeah. That last drink, it's the night before Thanksgiving. I don't realize it's the night before Thanksgiving. But it's like, or maybe it's Thanksgiving. I don't know. It's midnight. It's late at night. At that point in time, it hadn't rained in LA in forever. And like, I'm trying to like get in a comfortable place in the strip mall, and it's raining, and like, I can't get in a spot where the rain's not like dripping on my forehead somehow.
Right.
And I'm trying to get to sleep. Straight liquor was too hard to steal. So I just stolen wine, and like, and I remember for like this bottle, I didn't have a wine opener. I obviously wasn't walking around with a wine opener.
Right. Yeah.
So I had to, like,
Those days had been long gone.
Yeah. So the cork, I had to break the bottle on like the side of the sidewalk, and like drink out of like
shards of glass.
Yeah. And it's raining and it's cold, and I just want to stop shaking. I just want to feel warm. And I just want to go fall asleep. And then waking up that next day and realizing that it's Thanksgiving, and watching people walk in and out of the supermarket getting their last minute grocery stuff. And, it's at that point in time where the thought that I had heard said plenty of times in AA, which is my best thinking got me here.
Right.
And, I kind of sat with that thought for a good minute.
Yeah, it's
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I have felt that exact same way, far away from home, homeless, penniless, hopeless. And here is all the evidence I needed that I did this to myself, or I allowed my addiction to do this to me. And, I was a willing participant in my own downfall.
Right. And there's when you get to that point, there's no pointing fingers.
No.
Those fingers
this is all your fault.
They lead right back to me.
Yeah.
So Thanksgiving Day 2018, you're watching all these people who seemingly are happy, joyous, and free, walking into the grocery store, getting their last minute groceries to go to celebrate with their lovely families, that everyone is happy and perfect and their lives are perfect. What was that like for you witnessing that. And what was was that a motivator to take the next step, or did that just create anger within you? What was that moment like? Because you mentioned it, so it's obviously impactful in your life. What were you thinking when you were looking at all those seemingly happy people walk in and out of that store?
Yeah. I was sad. That for sure. The thought also came to mind of like, I wonder if my family is worried about me. Because I've been off the grid for like a week.
Right.
I've been phoneless for like a week at that point in time.
Were you close with your family? Was it a very deep relationship, or had they kind of set healthy boundaries with you before all of this, or were they still kind of in your life in a big way?
Yeah. I would say that, and I would say not overly close at that point in time, but not a burned bridge either. Like my tendency with my drinking was to isolate myself, like cut myself off from everybody.
Right.
So like, I didn't like to ask for help. I did, and like I knew how bad I looked and how bad. So I like to be as far away from people as I could when I knew so like, I felt guilty because, I felt guilt because it's just like I'd been off the grid. They might think I'm dead,
Right.
Some of those thoughts were coming up, and kind of while we're in this moment in the shopping center outside of the grocery store, it's that full pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. I remember asking a few people if I can borrow their phone, and they do not want to talk to me, and I realized like I am that guy on the curb in LA that no one wants to talk to.
Right.
That no one trusts, and
this is where your addiction has brought you.
Yeah. That completely demoralizing feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, so I eventually made my way to a hospital. I was like, I really wanted this to be my day one. I really wanted it to be that last day. And, but I was just in so much pain, so much, shaking all this. And I'm like, I gotta get myself into a hospital. Like, that's the only way I can think. Like, I gotta get away from this. And, I actually, like, this is how desperate I was. I actually laid down in the street so that I could maybe get an ambulance to like take me.
Right.
And they came, but they were like, we can't help you. They were like, this is not a homeless service,
Right.
And I remember I finally found my way to one. And then I got there, and the security guard told me like, this is not a homeless shelter. And I said, well, like, I want to kill myself. I'm like this and that.
Right.
And like,
let me in.
Like, we can't help you. And then they're like, but you can use our phone. So I call my mom. And at this point in time, it's Thanksgiving evening. And I remember telling her, this is never gonna happen again, or something along the lines of, I'm never gonna put you through this again. And, you know, I know that at that point in time, I knew I believed it, but I was hoping I meant it, you know, because we've all had those moments where we said never again.
Absolutely.
And she got me an Uber to the sober living that I had gotten kicked out of, you know, maybe a month before. And I walked into that sober living, found the manager of the house, who was my friend, Bill Jericho, and said, I need help. And yeah, that was my day one. So
you were blessed with the gift of desperation, and
yeah.
you were finally ready to give this another shot and
Mm-hmm.
give it your all. So I want to. So that was the day after Thanksgiving, or that was Thanksgiving night of 2018?
That was Thanksgiving night.
Thanksgiving night. So the day after that was your first sober day, yes?
Yeah. I mean, I consider Thanksgiving Day as my first sober day, because I woke up and I may have drank like Thanksgiving after midnight, or like midnight of Thanksgiving Day, but I woke up Thanksgiving Day morning.
And you didn't have anything like as far as like after you went to sleep the day before Thanksgiving Day, right? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So what was so how long did you stay in the sober living? And I know your time is precious, and I want to get to the Sober Sidekick app because it's something that I believe wholeheartedly about. So I definitely want to leave enough time to be able to jump into that in great detail. But so how long were you at the sober house? What was the time frame like from the sober house the day after Thanksgiving to the day that you said, you know what, there is a need in the market for an app, and I believe that with my capabilities, I'm able to create something that's helpful to the world? What was that time frame like from day one to the creation or the thought of Sober Sidekick app?
Yeah. So I get to the sober house Thanksgiving night. They get me into a detox that night, and as I went into rehab, the thought and the intention I had, you know, this was a thought that came up during the day, is like, I don't know if I'm never going to drink again, but I'm going to work the 12 steps thoroughly before I do, because that's the one thing I haven't tried. I can lie to myself and say I've tried everything, but I haven't actually given that a thorough shot. So at that point in time, I've been to 4 rehabs in like 3 months. So I went into rehab knowing that, like, honestly, you know, I don't really care about these classes. You know, I'm just here to get this out of my system, and I'm going to find a sponsor and work the steps. So like 2-3 days in, and you know how it is, like even the 3rd and 4th day sober, you still have the shakes, you know, you're still like a shell of yourself. Your memory still isn't fully working, but they got me to a meeting, and it was like a Q&A meeting. And I wrote on the card of the Q&A, like, I need a sponsor so that I don't die. And like, or something like that. I need a sponsor so I can work the steps so that I don't die. I wrote that on the card. It was hypothetically anonymous, but it was a room full of people where everyone knew each other. And I was there still in my hospital pants. So it was pretty obvious who wrote it. And I remember when they read the cards, it was like, there was like an awkward moment of silence when that was read, because it's just like, who wants to take that on?
Right.
And this guy named Dan Pearson, who had a year sober at the time, volunteers, and he's like a year or two older than me. First time like I'd never met him before. He volunteers, and I end up being his first sponsee. He's still sober to this day. I moved across the country about 1.5 years ago. So I have a new sponsor where I am today. But, he is kind of my sponsor for life, from that perspective,
Absolutely.
from the years I spent in LA, and honestly turned out to be the best possible person for me. So, you know, um, it was working the steps. That was what I viewed that as like my mission while I was at that treatment center. And the other beneficial thing is I was the first client ever at that treatment center. So
Wow.
the first 10 days, it was just me by myself.
Talk about great attention.
Yeah. But, I mean, I made a joke in my head. It's like, this is me and all my problems in one place, and
Right.
no one to point fingers at.
Yeah.
So I stay in that detox for 30 days. I probably get to like step 3 or 4. And then my first day, because I had entered treatment on like, so when I leave, it's like December 23rd, 24th, something like that. And I go into a new sober living, and they take us to a meeting, and it's Christmas Eve. And I remember, and it's like, so my first day in that sober living is Christmas Eve. They take us to a meeting, and I'm watching the way like the program works from the perspective of love, tolerance, grace, connection, like watching the support flow around the room.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, like what if like you could create the same level of energy and make it accessible through an app? That thought stuck in my mind. And when I got home, I started coding. I didn't know what I was going to call it, but I didn't, like, the name Sober Sidekick didn't come to mind later, but I started trying to figure out how can I build this. And
so did you have any experience with coding or app building prior to that? What was your background in that?
Yeah. So I had done a tech startup when I was in college, and I didn't know how to code when I was part of that, but I saw the potential from the people who I worked with in that startup.
What was your position in that startup?
So it was actually my idea, and
okay.
And then I pulled in other people
Beautiful.
to help make it happen. And and that was kind of a wild experience. So we went viral on Twitter on launch day, and Jay-Z retweeted it, and Ellen DeGeneres. And I'm like, this is my first crack at doing anything in my life, or in like this world, and it goes viral on Twitter. But as it's going viral on Twitter, shit hits the fan. No one, like, the app stops working for everyone. No one knows how to fix it. They finally get it fixed. And I start learning all these real world lessons very, very quickly.
Right.
And that app eventually ends up crashing and burning. But anyways, after that crashed and burned, I decided, okay, I want to do this again. So I'm going to try to learn how to code. So I'd spent like 2 or 3 years, like taking courses online, just like, finding like these, Udemy courses, and just trying to learn as I can, and building shitty apps here and there. Like,
yeah.
Like, so I'd like built a few apps that had made it to the App Store, but no one ever used them. And, at this point in time, like, I still wouldn't even consider myself like a professional developer. I just had the bare minimum skills, knowledge to get something out there.
And you had the drive, which is the number one most important thing. You had the drive, you had a little bit of knowledge, you had a little bit of heating your head against the wall, which for me, that's the best way for me to learn. That everything in this studio was, I had no idea how to do anything in here when I first started. When I first started with Drew, it was, we had a little room next to this, and we had a little table and a couple mics, and Drew started it before that, before I ever came on. And it's just, I had no idea what I was doing. But you had the drive. We had the drive, and we had the audacity to keep going when we hit our head against the wall. And it sounds like that's what you did. So go on.
Yeah, exactly. And, so I got to work, and 30 days later, I pushed it to the App Store. Actually, it was less than 30 days because I remember it kept getting rejected by Apple.
Why?
So
did you ever determine like the reasoning for that?
Oh yeah, they have a very, very high standard in terms of quality. So every time anyone pushes an app to Apple and Google now, Google, it used to be they'd just let anything in.
The Wild Wild West.
A person will go through your app and say, does this meet the checklist? Like, is there a terms and conditions in the app? For anything that has social, like any social capabilities, you have to have a flagging feature, you have to have a blocking feature. If they see that like your app crashes, like, so there's like hundreds of reasons why they might reject your app.
Sure.
So like Apple kept rejecting because honestly it wasn't a very quality app. But I remember the day I got my 60-day sober chip, I got the email from Apple that Sober Sidekick was approved.
Sweet.
And it was perfect because there was a convention in LA, and it was my first time ever going to a convention. So it's just like, I just got the news that like this app has been approved in the App Store. So I'm like, I get my 60-day chip, and I'm just telling everybody, everyone I see, like, hey, like, download this app, tell me what you think. So it was a cool day.
Absolutely. So it was 60 days. You got sober. 60 days later, you got approved on the App Store, on Apple App Store. And that had to be just a beautiful, beautiful feeling. I mean, most people are maybe starting to feel a little bit of relief from being sober at 60 days.
Crying in their breakfast. Just, can't even keep your cigarettes in order in 60 days.
Exactly. So you were killing it. You were blessed with this incredible drive, this incredible opportunity to bring something to the market that was unique and helpful. So 60 days in, I take it you took it to the convention and got some good feedback from it at the convention. What was after that 60 days, once you got approved? When did you get the feeling that, hey, this is something that is actually going to stick around? Was there ever that? Did you ever doubt it? Did you ever have doubts, or in the back of your head you were like, no, you know what? I'm passionate about this. I know this is going to be successful. I know people are telling me this is not going to work. I know people are saying, even Apple is saying, no, this is, get it out of here. Yeah. Get it out of here. Did you have that feeling in your heart that, no, you know what? I'm going to keep going until I push this damn thing through?
Yeah. So, at this point in time, there's I would say, for one, I'm in a sober living. I have nothing better to be doing with my time. I have nothing, so like working on that app, in some ways it was an outlet for me because I had released and published 5 or 6 apps into the App Store before then that never went anywhere.
Right.
Like I'm talking about no one ever used it.
Right.
So like it's not like I would, I wasn't like 100% this is going to work. It's just like, I really like this idea. I really like working on it. And, and either way, like I'm building a skill for myself,
right.
Like, cause I know I have a long way to go as a developer, and it'll be a cherry on top if like a few people find it valuable.
So you had an incredibly beautiful and positive attitude about it. and you and I share this, that,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to give it 100%. If it's successful, great. If not, I damn sure am going to learn from what I'm going through right now and be able to apply that in the future. So it sounds like you kind of were void of that, like, internal negative self-talk BS, like, no, you were ready to roll. You were ready to, look, I'm going to throw it at the wall. And if it doesn't stick, I'm going to use what I learned from this tomorrow. And
Mm-hmm.
that is what, that's what describes an entrepreneur. That is what that is. That is being willing to make mistakes. That is being willing to fall flat on your face, not 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 times. It was Sober Sidekick your 6th app? Was that? Did I get that?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Something like that.
5 times of staying positive, pushing through, and no matter what, keep going, keep trudging the path to happy destiny until it finally stick. It finally stuck. So that 6th one was the one that stuck. And I'm sure you learn things every single day about what this, I'm sure you tap into those experiences that you learned during those quote unquote failures that other people would consider failures, but I would consider, no, that's just part of the journey. Those 5 apps that failed before Sober Sidekick took off, those things were incredibly important for what is today. And without those failures, you wouldn't be where you're at now. So running to those quote unquote, again, failures with gratitude, love, and compassion for yourself, that is the ticket to success right there. So I want to talk a little bit. We're getting close to the end here. So I really want to take about 10 minutes. So someone that has never experienced any sort of sober app, what I want to do is I want you to take 10 minutes and walk us through what the app is all about, how people are using it, how people can use it, the capabilities within the app to create meaningful connections, et cetera, et cetera. I want if my grandma were still alive, she has no idea what a cell phone even is, I want her at the end of your little speech right here, I would want her to know exactly what this app is about and how her grandsons or her great-grandson can now use this app to help other people. So tell me, and to help themselves. So let's dive into that.
Yeah. So I'll start off with getting really clear on the problem that I wanted to solve when I started building it, which is, people don't relapse, people don't commit suicide typically in AA meetings or therapy sessions or in and during treatment. These are things that happen when people are alone. And then I also looked at all the suffering that I put myself through before I'd even been to AA, before I'd even been to rehab, or after I'd been to AA, but before it stuck. And, before I'd gotten any phone numbers, or maybe I had phone numbers, but I didn't feel brave enough to reach out and call someone who I had never called before. So, that's the problem. And I'm being hyper focused on, and, as I built, the first versions of this, and then the solution is, what if, and I had actually, so I built this karma algorithm for an app for undiscovered musicians. That was the one that went viral. So like that, and the core concept worked. We just failed at executing. But the core concept was, the more feedback you gave to other artists, the more feedback you would receive on your own content. And I was like, like that concept actually worked for musicians, but like, what if it could? This already works and is what people in recovery already do, is give to receive. Right. But like, what if we could create a give to receive algorithm that could guarantee that no newcomer ever goes without support? And that every single time someone posts within this platform, engages, even, it's their first time. No, they're anonymous. Within minutes, real people reach out to them, whether it's 2 a.m., no matter what they're talking about. So the core thesis, the core test of that first version of Sober Sidekick is, can we create a way to guarantee that no one ever, ever, ever goes without support when they post on this platform? Because I had seen at that point in time, there's a shit ton of sober apps there, people tracking their sober time. I'd seen like Sober Grid, all these different forums.
Right.
And I'm like, the problem I want to solve is I want to create a world where there is a 100% guarantee every time you post into this platform, you're going to receive real feedback from a real person from your own community. And we now call that our empathy algorithm. And it since we've launched, no member has ever posted within Sober Sidekick and not received support. And now that we have over 400,000 downloads, and people have received support through Sober Sidekick over 1 million times now, that's been true 100% of the time. And then we continue to build on that. So we know we have a 1-to-1 support ratio, and then we've gamified the act of giving support in order to increase that ratio from now it's 6-to-1. For every one person who posts, 6 people are going to provide written support. And it's usually in minutes, if not seconds. So it's that user experience of being able, a single mom gets off work at 2 a.m. She writes a post. She feels triggered. Minutes later, she looks at her phone. 6 people reached out. And, that's the feeling we want to create for everyone within minutes the first time they download Sober Sidekick.
I can attest. I experienced this. I mean, I dove real deep into this app. I'm not going to talk with someone and not know what their product or their service is all about. And everything you're saying is absolutely true. When I downloaded the app, I immediately felt a part of within 60 seconds. It was just it blew me away. It truly did. I mean, it lit a fire underneath my ass to really, really engage and to help those people that are reaching out that maybe have less time than me or have the same amount of time as me, but are struggling to have a good day or are having a hard day rather, or the people that have much more sober time, that there are those people on there that, they've been sober for years and years and years, but they get vulnerable, they get open, they get honest on your app. They say, hey, I'm having a bad day. They post about something. Hey, I've been sober for X amount of years, but you know what? I'm struggling today. And to have a place like that where people can come and be open, honest, and most importantly, vulnerable and feel connection, it's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. So,
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
What are some things that you have learned from being in the administrator role here? Because you obviously are, the master of all the data. What are some things that have impacted you along the way? On a personal level.
Yeah. So in the beginning, I really, really clung to, the community as like an extension of my recovery community. Like I was going to meetings 4 or 5 times a week in person, but this felt like in the people I got to know in that journey. Cause I'm 60 days sober and this app goes live. And then there's people with 2 weeks sober who are joining. And I'll also add the point of context of we only had 3,000 downloads a year and a half in. It was a very, very slow burn. And for a majority of the time, I didn't necessarily expect that this would one day reach the numbers that it is. It's just I wanted everyone who was a part of the community early on to feel it was about for every 100 who comes in, how many of that 100 have a good experience with the platform? How many of them don't have crashes? It was all about quality over quantity was that focus early on. And that was a lesson from an entrepreneurship perspective I learned from that first startup. Like, who gives a shit if you have 40,000 downloads if no one's there a week later?
Right.
So like, that's what, so patience was something, but also like I was enjoying it the whole time. Like my goal wasn't, I didn't really have any hard goals. It was just like, I just want to build the best experience I can build. And I also knew that like the more engaged I was, like the more it was helping me. Like in year one, my phone number, anyone could call my phone number at any point in time. So like people were downloading the app, then calling me, then telling me like I just had a gun to my throat or in my mouth a month ago, and I pulled the trigger and it misfired. And I'm hearing like all these real stories, like people are texting and calling. Like, so like, you know, in the beginning, it's just like this super high touch. Like I know there's a shit ton of problems with the app, but it's not about like the app. It's about the community and it's about the people in it. And, you know, it was truly like those people who joined where they were willing to deal with the bugs and the kinks because they believed in what the community was about. That made it so special. And then, you know, as you know, there were a few like tipping points in this time in this business. Like, you know, 2 years in, it's starting to gain more traction, and I'm actively thinking more and more about how do I make this sustainable? Because I know I'm just one guy, and I know that there's an opportunity to do something even bigger and broader for the world here. But with this being something that I do when I get home from my day job and on weekends, there's only so much impact I can have, versus if I can build something sustainable around this to where I can actually build a team and, you know, invest in marketing and all these different things. Like it had 10,000 people before a dollar had ever been spent on marketing. So like, you know, I start thinking more and more actively about how do I actually build a tech startup into this or out of this. And, you know, that's when, you know, some of the lessons, you know, there were a ton of lessons. One lesson I learned the hard way is that rehab, brick and mortar for-profit rehabs is like the worst way I could monetize it. I learned that lesson the hard way. And I'm sure you guys are aware of some of the tomfoolery that goes on
Very much
in
so.
the marketing world. Huh?
Very much so.
Yeah. Yeah. There are good places out there. It's just not a scalable model, because it's just like, I had spent like, I would like spend a month vetting a place, feel really good. They'd say all the right things, and then 6 months later, new shit would come out, and I'd be like, okay, like I do not feel comfortable scaling this. So, you know, from a business perspective, like a lot of hard lessons, and but then it's kind of this dichotomy of, you know, I don't really care about this becoming like a profitable business. I just want it to be a scalable solution. And from that perspective, you know, trying different things and seeing it work out or not work out, or it works out, but then I realize I can't sleep at night. So then we're going to cut this off. You know, like there's a Harvard case study about my decision to no longer work with treatment centers, and like but I think the theme in all of this, and one of my team members pointed it out this week, is like, you know, Chris, your bottom line job is to protect the culture of this company. You know, and another thing that was said is culture eats strategy for breakfast. Right. And it's not about, you know, having the best strategy about how you want to change the world. It's about what are your non-negotiables? What are you not willing to give up on? And when you say this is a part of your mission, do your actions actually reflect that? And these were like the hard lessons, some of the hard lessons. And one of the unlocks for me is like, 2 years ago, we had, maybe 75 coming up on 100,000 members. And I'm trying to raise funding. Like I ditched the treatment centers. I know I need investors. These expenses are getting way more than I can handle on my own. And, like expenses are going up, no money's coming in. I'm never going to charge members to use this. And I'm getting investor advice. I'm getting advisor advice, business people, healthcare people, all these different people. And one of my most trusted mentors was like, how much are your users part of that feedback loop? Because you're hearing all these voices, but you are no longer hearing the voices of the reason why you started this. So after that, we made a decision where every Thursday at 4 p.m., we're going to have a Zoom meeting where any of our members who want to join can join, and they can just talk to us, tell us how.
What a wonderful idea.
Right.
What a truly wonderful idea. Invite people in. We're here to serve your community, and we're offering you what is so often lacking in the tech world, transparency and feeling a part of. I mean, who here really believes that Mark Zuckerberg has your best interest at heart?
Right.
I mean, really. Does anybody think that? No.
Yeah.
And it's such a novel idea. It's such a simple idea, but I would imagine so incredibly easy to look past. Is like, we are here to serve our members within this app, but I'm hearing is these voices from professionals that are not in the app, that are not necessarily in recovery or not sober. And I could see how that would be incredibly easy to look past. Like, hey, I'm focusing on listening to the professionals, but and who was that said that? A software developer or who brought that to your attention about, or was it an investor that brought it to your attention about, hey, why don't you ask your users and talk to your users? Who was that again?
Yeah, at that point in time, I had no investors, but I was getting a lot of investor advice because I was trying desperately to get an investor. But it was one of my old professors
mentor.
From before I failed out of school, out of Eastern University, who he was the one person from that school where his words always stood out to me. And I had reached out to reconnect with him in my sobriety, and, more just from like a life, wisdom.
Life coach.
Yeah. Like, here's what's going on, here's what I'm feeling, like, what am I missing? So him and I have been running that meeting every Thursday for now 2 years straight. And what's cool is we never skipped it. Christmas, Thanksgiving, it's Thanksgiving every Thursday, every year, obviously, but we've never skipped it. Sometimes I'll be on a flight and Lindy will handle it without me, or like we'll both be tied up and someone else from our team, but there's like 4 of our team members who are on it every Thursday, to where like that meeting is always there.
Right.
And it's typically like this, like there's a core group of 10 10 people who I've gotten to know through that Thursday meeting, where I've known them for like a year, and I talk to them every week, and I know intimately about their lives, and their struggles. And so in order to get invited to that meeting, you have to give support to other members at a certain, like, I think it's like,
I would just like to commend your ability to weaponize for a net moral good, algorithms and enticement to be involved in the app. That's a great idea. We all too often hear about being manipulated for some anonymous third party corporations benefit. And I love what you're doing. I think this is great. I've loved the app. I hope other people will be incentivized to join.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, and that's the entire incentivization structure within the app. Like, we wrote down as a product thesis that this is a we platform with empathy, without ego. So everything about your profile, it shows right next to your name the number of times you supported others within the platform. And the top members, that's who's given support the most times today. And then we have, I don't know if either of you have seen like the butterfly score or whatever, where it shows you supported 5 people this week who have been sober for a combined 500 days. And then they went out and supported 50 more people. And the thing about technology, I don't know if any of you have seen The Social Dilemma.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the main point I take from that is people will do what they're incentivized to do. And and there's a book called Hooked, and it's I've read it from a product perspective, but everything is either a trigger, which leads to an action, which leads to a variable reward, which leads to investment, which leads to a trigger. So every tech platform is built on that framework, because the faster you can get people through that framework, the more loyalty or engagement you build.
Are you familiar with a guy named Jerome Lanier?
I'm not. Maybe I am.
He's an odd-looking cat, got dreadlocks, and he plays this funny-looking musical instrument. All right, Jerome Lanier, Jaron Lanier. It looks like the French Lanier, Lanier. You would love everything he's got to say. He's got a TED Talk that's awesome. He's even got a more lengthy talk. He's the godfather of virtual reality. He is an endlessly interesting person. And he talks a lot about how tech companies get started. He was kind of there from a grassroots perspective. And I think he would find his speeches endlessly interesting. And he talks about the way that we're manipulated, these dopamine hits, and how it's so much easier to manipulate the mass with negativity than it is positivity. Hence why watching get on Twitter and it'll piss you off, and get on this and it makes you mad, and how it's easier to kind of grab and hold somebody's attention from making them angry. It's easier to make somebody angry than it is to make somebody happy. And I don't know.
Yeah.
You're talking about that hooked and the incentive reward to kind of, keep you churning along on the mouse on the wheel. I don't know. Jerome Lanier, super interesting. I think you would like watching his talks.
Yeah. Now that I've Googled him, I definitely know I've heard him talk before, but I'm looking forward to going down the rabbit hole here.
Look, he's got a talk you can find on YouTube. It's about an hour long. And I thought, I'm going to make my children, they get a little bit older. I'm going to make them listen to this to see how we can be so easily manipulated by social media.
Oh yeah. 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 And that, it's the bottom line for all of these companies, and it doesn't make them evil. It's just in order for them to compete and be the big player that they are, it's easier for them. And that's why it's interesting. Tech companies actually, in my opinion, have a way better handle on behavioral health than healthcare does. It's just because they're all behavioral scientists, they all know what it is that makes our minds tick, how to motivate a person.
He talks about that and how Stanford, I think he said that Stanford's, I'm not going to say their computer science division, but initially it was called something like behavior modification through tech. And they thought, well, we might get some heat for calling it that. And they end up changing the name, but you're exactly right. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. That's the fundamental problem that any tech startup has to start with, in entrepreneur in general. If I create this will I change behaviors in the world? Like that's kind of a baseline question in order to be an entrepreneur, or even like to launch a podcast. Like, the goal is to have an impact on behaviors and, hopefully to have a positive one. But what I feel where this is a non-negotiable is like, if I'm doing anything in recovery, it has to be very, very clear in terms of culture what the behaviors are that we are.
What's tolerable, what's desirable. Yeah.
The behaviors that we promote, and then the behaviors, and whether it's behaviors externally or internally within our team. Like, the reason we ditched working with rehabs is we didn't want an incentive structure where the more people who go to rehab, the more successful this company is, because that means we're
trying to get people in the hospital.
Or
we
that
want
means
to grow addiction so that we can have more customers.
Yeah. Or like, even if that's not my intention, like in terms of the business being successful and I hire people, or this, maybe one day I step away from this, versus figuring out what aligned incentives means.
How do y'all handle, I mean, we've all heard of, the law of unintended consequences, and this may even be stolen from one of Jerome Lanier's speeches. He talks about how maybe it's him, in Vietnam, France was in Vietnam, they're the colonial overlord, and there's a rat problem. And so the French government tells the Vietnamese, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. You're going to get $5 for every dead rat that you produce. All of a sudden, what happens? Rat farms pop up. People are purposefully growing rats so that they can kill them and cash them in. So how do you, through your team, run through, hey, look, I think I've got a good idea. I'm just afraid of the unknown, this X factor. How might it be weaponized negatively? How might it be, might it spur some conduct or behavior that we find anathema?
Yeah. So the biggest thing from my perspective is we have to build a company where business incentives, our financial incentives have to align with our members' best interests, and they have to go hand in hand. I see too many companies come up with complimentary social good, or like, we do this on the side, but like this is what we actually do to make money. And there can't be any misalignment in terms of our incentives can never go anywhere, we can never have financial incentives that could go against our members' best interests. So one of the cool things that came out of the Harvard case study, which I didn't think that decision was ever going to get turned into a Harvard case study. I thought it might be the last decision I made with Sober Sidekick before I ran out of money, was as I started fundraising after that case study happened, which that case study, it was completely up to chance. This Harvard guy read an article about us, which that article was completely up to chance because I just happened to be at a coffee shop, and this woman from Fortune started talking to me. And then she's like, oh, would you ever consider sharing your story? And I'm like, okay.
Well, maybe.
And that was the first time I ever had any press, and it was Fortune. And then this guy from Harvard was like, oh, that decision would make a really good case study. But then after the case study, then I was able to lead with that case study. And when I went to investors, it's just, I'd be upfront and like, if you're looking for a company that's going to take the shortest, easiest path to revenue, here's a case study. That's the exact opposite approach we're going to take. And we want to prove you can do well by doing good. Here are non-negotiables. And, over time, we began to attract investors who, that's what attracted them to us, is that we're very clear and specific on what we're not going to do, what our non-negotiables are from a culture standpoint. And, you had asked a while ago, and I know I've ranted and rambled a lot in this conversation.
No, you're doing great. You're doing fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, that truly has been one of the biggest lessons for me, because, I was introduced as a leader, and that honestly scares me. Like, I was honestly venting to one of my mentors this morning of like, what I'm most afraid of is being a leader. That's what I'm most afraid of. Like, I'm used to like living my own life one day at a time and only focusing on my own inventory. And I don't want to have to think about someone else's inventory. I don't want to have to like lead a team. I don't want to fire people. I want to only have to worry about myself and my own recovery. And because it
puts you between a rock and a hard place, where you're having to make these kind of decisions for the greater good. Well, and to protect the integrity of your idea. Protect the integrity of the app.
Yeah. And that's the big lesson I've learned is like that is the thing that only I can do. I can hire developers. I can raise money to, support other areas of the business. There's going to be people with different skills than me. But the thing that only I can do is protect the culture of this community, this platform. And that's the one thing that I can't give up on, in terms of my roles and responsibilities, in terms of Sober Sidekick. So that was a long rant.
Look, I think that's a wonderful thing to end on. I know we're kind of nearing the end of our availability here, is complimenting you on your unfailing fidelity to the mission here. Well done.
Yeah, you're making a massive difference, and you're being a stand-up guy doing so. You are unwilling to stray from what you know is right, even when perhaps, and this is just me thinking out loud, perhaps very, very juicy looking carrots are being hung in front of you from different angles, and you're like, no,
attractive nuisance.
Right. And you've stayed true to who you are and what you believe in. So, well done. I enjoy the app a tremendous amount. I love what you're doing. I am very likely going to engage more so I can get an invitation to that Thursday.
I know, I was
4
thinking
p.m.
the same thing.
That is absolutely 100% something that I am laser focused on doing. So,
love it.
Yeah, man. So thank you so much for taking the time today and talking with us and being so wonderful with your time. We wish you nothing but the best and continued success with everything that you're involved in. Ladies and gentlemen, one more thing, if people want to get in touch with you or the app, how could they go about doing that?
Yeah. The app is free, Apple and Google Play. If you want, feel free to read reviews before you make a decision. But the theme you're going to see is community and knowing that you're not alone. Free, just search Sober Sidekick in Google in the Apple App Store. If you want to get in touch with me, there's a contact us on our site. It has my email, chris@sobersidekick.com. I always get back to everyone who reaches out. Sometimes a few days late if I'm traveling, but I'm doing this because service keeps me sober. So beautiful. For that reason, I'm glad to get in touch with anyone for any reason who's on this sobriety journey.
Well, we love it, brother. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you. Are you going to be out of town next week for spring break? You're going to be. Oh, you're going to be here? Okay. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Chris, thanks again, brother. You're incredible. And we'll see you next week. Later, guys.
Thank you. How cool is that?